The city of Arkan was built with steel and stone, standing tall under the gray sky of an alien world. The air was cold, and the streets were filled with fear. At the heart of the city stood a giant platform made of dark metal. On that platform, chained with heavy iron, was the monster Dot. She was not like anyone had ever seen before. Her skin was deep purple, shining even in the dark. Her hair was long, black, and wild like a storm. But the most frightening part was her eyes. They glowed with bright violet light, burning like two small suns. People said that anyone who looked into her eyes would lose their mind. The monster sat silently, her head low, her hands tied with thick chains that wrapped around her body. The chains clamped with every small movement she made. No one knew her name, they just called her the Beast. Legend said she was captured after destroying 3 alien cities. She was too dangerous to kill, so they chained her forever. Guards stood around the platform, holding weapons that could fire lasers and lightning. They were always alert, always watching. The rulers of the city warned everyone, stay away from the monster. She is not a person, she is death itself. But one day, a human came to the city. His name was Daniel. He was not like the other travelers. Daniel was a curious man, wearing a black suit made of tough armor. His job was to explore alien worlds, learn their secrets, and report back to Earth. But what caught his attention was not the city's technology or tall towers. It was the chained figure sitting silently in the plaza. Daniel stood far from the platform, watching her. The alien citizens passed by, some throwing stones, some spitting, others simply shivering at her sight. But Daniel saw something else. She wasn't roaring. She wasn't fighting. She was quiet, almost sad. Daniel asked a nearby alien vendor, "Why is she chained like this?" The vendor, an old alien with gray skin and tired eyes, replied, "Because she is a monster. She burned cities. She killed thousands. We chained her so she can never hurt again. But has anyone talked to her?" Daniel asked. The vendor laughed. "Talk to her? No one dares. She is not one of us. She is a curse." Daniel looked back at her. The chains around her neck, arms, and legs seemed old, rusted from time. Her head was still down. She looked tired, not dangerous. Something inside Daniel whispered that there was more to her story. That night, while the city slept and the guards changed shifts, Daniel quietly returned to the plaza. The night was cold, the sky filled with strange stars. He stood closer this time, just a few steps away from the platform. The monster slowly raised her head. Her glowing eyes locked onto Daniel's face. His heart beat fast, but he didn't run. He stood still. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The chains creaked as she shifted slightly. "Who are you really?" Daniel asked softly. "Are you really a monster?" Her eyes watched him, studying him like a puzzle. She didn't speak. She didn't growl. She just stared. "I don't believe you are," Daniel whispered. "There is sadness in your eyes. I can see it." The wind blew between them, carrying dust and cold. Then something unexpected happened. A tear, shining like silver, rolled down her purple cheek. Daniel froze. A monster crying? She dropped her head again, silent, her hair covering her face. Daniel stood there, shocked. He wanted to say more, but he didn't know what. Then a voice shouted from behind, "Step away, human." A guard had spotted him. Daniel stepped back quickly, raising his hands. "I'm not doing anything," he said. "You don't speak to the monster. She will curse you." The guard yelled, aiming his weapon. Daniel walked away slowly, but his mind was full of questions. A monster who cried. That didn't make sense. Monsters didn't have feelings. But she did. He had seen it. Back in his small room, Daniel sat on the bed, unable to sleep. His heart was heavy. He remembered the sadness in her eyes. Who was she? Why was she really chained? What if the stories were lies? He decided he would return. He had to know the truth. He had to speak to her again, because something deep inside told him she was not the monster the world claimed her to be. Asterisk, not all chains are made of iron, and not every monster is made of evil. Daniel woke up early, long before the twin suns of the alien world could rise. His mind was restless. He kept seeing her glowing eyes, the single silver tear, and the heavy chains around her fragile-looking arms. Something wasn't right. He could feel it deep inside his bones. While the rest of the city began its day, Daniel quietly prepared. He took a small bag, placed inside it a piece of fruit, some bread, and a container of water. The city still whispered stories about the beast of Arkan, but Daniel didn't listen to their warnings anymore. He was determined to return to her. When he reached the plaza, the crowd was smaller than before. A few citizens passed by, shaking their heads or mumbling insults at the chained creature. The guards stood around, bored but alert. Daniel kept his distance, pretending to be a regular traveler. But his eyes never left her. She sat there just as before, silent, unmoving, her eyes half closed as if in deep thought or sadness. The chains had left marks on her skin, dark bruises and old scars. Daniel's heart ached at the sight. If she was truly a danger, why did she look so broken? He waited until nightfall again. When the guards changed their posts, Daniel stepped closer. This time he climbed halfway up the platform. The iron steps were cold under his boots. He could hear the faint sound of her breathing, slow, steady. Tired. He took out the food and water and gently placed them on the platform. She didn't move. "I brought you something to eat," Daniel said, his voice calm and respectful. "I don't know if you eat the same as we do, but I couldn't just watch." She stirred slightly, her head tilting, but her eyes remained shut. Daniel sat a little further, keeping his distance. He didn't want to scare her, even though the world said she was the scary one. Minutes passed. Then, her eyes opened slowly, glowing in the darkness like twin stars. She looked at the food, then at Daniel. Her lips parted and a low voice, dry and heavy, spoke. "Why?" Daniel swallowed hard. She had spoken. It was not a growl, not a roar, but words. "Because I saw your tear," Daniel answered. "Monsters don't cry." She looked down at the food, then back at him. "You are human?" "Yes," Daniel nodded. "I'm from Earth. My name is Daniel." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "I remembered humans. Long ago." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "You've met humans before?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked away, her face shadowed under her messy hair. "Why are you chained here?" Daniel asked softly. "What did you do?" She let out a heavy breath, almost like a sigh of pain. Then she whispered a word, "Trapped." "Trapped by who?" She shook her head. "Not ready. You will run away like the others." "No," Daniel said firmly. "I won't run." She raised her head, her bright eyes studying him carefully. "They all run. They see me, and they run, because they don't see you. They only see the chains, the eyes, the stories," Daniel replied. "But I saw your tear. That's not what monsters do." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said softly, "My name is Soraka." Daniel smiled faintly. "Soraka. That's a beautiful name." Her lips twitched, almost like she was trying to remember how to smile. But the chains clanked as she moved, reminding them both that freedom was still far away. "Daniel," she said slowly, "if you stay, the guards will kill you." "Then I'll be careful," Daniel said. "But I'll come back." "Why?" "Because I want to know the truth," Daniel said. "And because no one deserves to sit alone in chains." Soraka looked away, her eyes softening. "You are not like the others." Daniel stood up, stepping back down the platform stairs. He looked at her one last time that night. "I'll come back, Soraka. I promise." She watched him disappear into the shadows, her heart heavy yet warmer than before. No one had ever said her name with kindness. No one had ever called her anything but a monster. Until now. And for the first time in many years, Soraka felt hope, small, fragile, but alive. Some truths live in shadows because the light is too weak to reveal them. For the next few nights, Daniel returned to the platform in secret. Each time, he brought food and water, though Soraka rarely touched them. She sat quietly, watching him. With those glowing eyes, she still looked dangerous, but her voice was gentle, like the wind before a storm. Daniel asked many questions, but Soraka answered only with short words or silence. She seemed afraid not of him, but of speaking the truth. Daniel knew there was a story hidden behind her chains, a story no one wanted to tell. One night, the sky was darker than usual. Thick clouds covered the moons, and the stars were nowhere to be seen. Daniel climbed the platform again and sat in front of Soraka. "Tell me, Soraka," Daniel said softly. "What happened to you? Why are you chained like this? Who did this to you?" For a while she said nothing. The wind whispered through the city, and the metal chains groaned as she shifted slightly. Then she spoke. "Long ago I was not chained, I was chosen." "Chosen for what?" Daniel asked. "To protect," Soraka whispered. "I was created by the Elders, an ancient alien race older than time. They gave me power, made me strong, to guard the Gate of Worlds." Daniel's eyes widened. "The Gate of Worlds? What's that?" "A portal," she said, "a doorway between galaxies. A path to the stars, but with power comes fear. The Elders feared that one day I might use the power for myself." Daniel listened closely. Her voice was heavy with sadness, as if every word weighed on her heart. "They tricked me," she continued. "They called me a monster, spread lies, made others fear me. Then they chained me here, to keep me from ever returning to the gate." Daniel frowned. "But why would they fear you? Did you ever hurt anyone?" Soraka shook her head slowly. "I protected. I never destroyed. But fear. Fear blinds even the wise." Daniel clenched his fists. The world believed she was a killer, a destroyer of cities. But here she was, a prisoner of fear, betrayed by her own creators. "They told me I was dangerous," Soraka said, her voice barely a whisper. "So I believed them. I stopped speaking. I stopped fighting. I became what they wanted, a chained beast." Daniel's heart ached. "You're not a beast, Soraka. You're not." She looked at him, her bright eyes softening. "Why do you care, human? You could walk away." "Because I've seen enough lies in my life," Daniel said. "And I know how it feels to be misunderstood." Soraka watched him in silence. Then she said, "You remind me of the first ones." Daniel tilted his head. "Who are the first ones?" Soraka smiled faintly. "Humans, your kind. I saw them long ago when they first stepped beyond their world. They were curious, brave, stubborn. Just like you," Daniel chuckled. "Sounds about right." Suddenly, a noise echoed from below. Heavy footsteps, voices shouting. "Guards!" Soraka warned, "Go." But Daniel stayed for a second longer. "I'll come back, Soraka. I swear. Go," she said urgently. Daniel quickly climbed down the platform and hid in the shadows just as the guards arrived, their lights scanning the platform. "Someone was here," one guard muttered, kicking the food container. Another snarled, "If we catch him, he'll wish he was dead." They didn't see Daniel hidden behind a pillar. His heart pounded, but not from fear for himself. He worried for Soraka. The guards treated her like a thing, not a being with feelings and memories. When they finally left, Daniel slipped away, quietly returning to his room. That night he couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of the Gate of Worlds, the ancient elders, and the betrayal of Soraka. He knew the truth now, or at least a part of it. But the question burned inside. Him, If Soraka was created to protect, then who really was the monster, the chained guardian, or the ones who bound her? Daniel looked out the window at the distant platform. A storm was coming, both in the sky and in his soul. He had made a choice already. He would return, not just to visit, but to find a way to break the chains. Asterisk. Some powers sleep quietly, not because they are weak, but because they made a promise never to wake in anger. The storm finally arrived. Black clouds rolled over the alien sky, and rain poured down like silver needles. Thunder cracked loudly, shaking the buildings of the city. Yet, on the metal platform in the center, Soraka sat unmoving, her glowing eyes watching the rain fall. Chain-soaked, hair heavy, yet her gaze remained fixed calm, waiting. Daniel returned, hiding under his cloak, drenched from head to toe. But he didn't care. He had questions that needed answers. He climbed the platform, water splashing under his boots. Soraka didn't flinch as he approached. "You came back," she said quietly. "I told you I would," Daniel replied. He sat in front of her, the rain dripping from his chin. "Soraka, I need to know something." She waited silently, her eyes shining even brighter under the stormy sky. "You said you were created to protect the Gate of Worlds, but why didn't you fight when they chained you? Why didn't you break free?" Soraka looked away, her face heavy with an old sadness. "Because I made a promise." Daniel frowned. "To who?" "To the universe," she whispered. "To never harm life unless I had no other choice, if I fought back. If I used my full power, I would destroy everything. I would become the very monster they claimed I was." Daniel stared at her, realizing the terrible weight of her promise. She had the power to break her chains, but at the cost of innocent lives. "I chose the chains," Soraka said, "because freedom earned through death is not freedom at all." Daniel felt the rain wash over him, but inside, his heart burned with anger. They had chained her, lied about her, and yet she remained peaceful. She sacrificed her freedom to protect those who hated her. "That's not fair," Daniel muttered. "Life is not fair, human," Soraka said softly. "But you are different. Why do you keep returning?" "Because I can't leave you like this," Daniel said. "You deserve to be free." Soraka shook her head slowly. "You can't break these chains, Daniel. They were forged by the elders. Only power equal to theirs could destroy them." "Then show me," Daniel said. "Show me your power." Soraka's eyes glowed brighter. "If I show you, others will see too, and they will kill you for knowing." Daniel smiled faintly. "I've always been a bit stubborn." For the first time, Soraka chuckled, a deep sound that echoed faintly. Then she closed her eyes. The rain around them stopped, not because it ceased to fall, but because the droplets froze mid-air. Time itself seemed to slow. Daniel looked around in shock. Every raindrop hung like crystal in the air, unmoving. What is this?" Daniel whispered. Soraka opened her eyes, which now blazed like violet flames. "My power is not just strength. It is control over space and time. I can bend the world, but I promise never to use it against life." Daniel reached out, touching the frozen raindrop. It was cold and still like glass. Soraka continued, "If I wanted, I could have destroyed the chains, crushed the guards, and fled. But I would have broken my vow." Daniel looked at her with awe. "Then why show me this?" "Because," she said gently, "you are the first to ask, the first to see me." With that, time resumed. The rain splashed down again, and the cold wind howled through the plaza. Daniel sat in silence, drenched but amazed. "I believe you, Soraka," he said. "You're no monster, you're a protector." She smiled sadly. "But what will you do with this truth, Daniel?" "If you speak it, they'll kill you." Daniel stood up. "Then I won't tell them. I'll show them." Soraka raised an eyebrow. "How?" Daniel looked determined. I'll find a way to break these chains. Without killing anyone, I'll find a way. You're only human, she said. What can one human do? Daniel smiled. You'll be surprised what humans can do when they care. For the first time, Soraka's eyes softened, not with sadness, but with a glimmer of hope. Daniel turned to leave, the storm still roaring above. But in his heart, a spark had been lit. He didn't know how, he didn't know when, but he would find a way to free the monster, who wasn't a monster at all. Courage is not born when the path is clear, but when the road ahead is full of shadows. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The storm had passed, but his mind was restless like the winds that still howled in the dark corners of the city. He stared at the ceiling of his small room, replaying Soraka's words again and again. She had the power to break free, yet she stayed bound because of a promise. Daniel asked himself over and over, what good is power if it only brings more pain? He had no answer, but deep inside, a fire was growing. He could not stand by while Soraka remained chained like an animal. She deserved freedom, even if the whole galaxy was blind to her truth. At dawn, Daniel gathered his few tools, wires, and small devices. He wasn't an engineer, but he was clever with machines. If he couldn't break the chains with strength, perhaps he could with intelligence. He spent hours studying the city. The guards' patrols, the security systems, the pulse barriers around the platform, every detail mattered. The chains were no ordinary metal. They shimmered faintly, pulsing with alien energy. They were built not just to hold her physically, but to suppress her powers. Daniel realized he couldn't do this alone. But who would help him? No one in the city would dare. Then, he remembered an old alien he had met before, the vendor who first told him the legend of the beast. His name was Garo, a wrinkled gray-skinned alien who sold tools and scraps. Perhaps Garo knew more than he admitted. That evening, Daniel visited Garo's stall. You again, human, Garo said, narrowing his glowing yellow eyes. You still chasing stories? I need your help, Daniel said directly. It's about her V1 on the platform. Garo's expression darkened. Stay away from that thing, human. You don't know what you're playing with. I do, Daniel said. I know she's not what they say. I've spoken to her. Garo's hands trembled slightly. You're a fool. Maybe, but I want to free her. Garo stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head. You're mad. Maybe, but if you know anything about those chains, how to break them, I need to know. Garo sighed heavily. Those chains were forged by the elders using something called a null core. It drains energy from whatever it touches. She can't break them because her power is sucked away. Then how do I stop the null core? Daniel pressed. Garo looked around cautiously before leaning closer. You'd need an anti-null crystal. But it's forbidden here, illegal, dangerous. Where can I find one? Daniel asked. There's a black market trader at the edge of the city, Garo muttered. But even if you get it, if they catch you, you're dead. Daniel nodded. Then I'll just have to not get caught. Garo shook his head with a sigh. You humans, always chasing death with open arms. But there was a flicker of respect in Garo's eyes. Later that night, under the cover of darkness, Daniel sneaked to the outskirts where the city faded into shadows and ruins. He found the black market a hidden network of criminals, traders, and exiles. The place smelled of oil, smoke, and danger. Daniel approached a trader with a mechanical eye and whispered, I need an anti-null crystal. The trader laughed, double quotes expensive ... and deadly. You got the credits? Daniel handed over all he had, every last coin. The trader inspected it and then pulled out a small glowing blue crystal. This is death in your pocket, human, the trader sneered. Good luck. Daniel returned to his room, the crystal safely hidden. He stared at it, feeling the weight of his choice. If he was caught, death was certain. But if he succeeded, Soraka might be free. The next night, Daniel returned. to the platform. The city was asleep, and the guards were fewer. Soraka raised her head as he approached. "You came back." Daniel knelt beside her. "I told you I'd find a way." He pulled out the anti-null crystal. Her eyes widened in shock. "Where did you?" "Doesn't matter," Daniel interrupted. "This might disable the chains. If I'm lucky." "You'll die if the guards see you," she warned. Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I made my choice." Slowly, he pressed the crystal against the chain's core lock. A soft hum echoed, and the glow in the chains flickered. For the first time in centuries, the chains trembled not from her movement, but from weakness. Soraka's eyes glowed brighter. "It's working. Suddenly, distant shouts echoed. The guards had noticed. "Daniel!" Soraka cried. "Run!" But Daniel stood his ground, still holding the crystal firmly against the chain. "I'm not leaving you," he said, eyes burning with determination. The footsteps grew louder, but Daniel didn't care, because for him, the choice was already made. Freedom. Or death. Sometimes. The smallest spark is enough to awaken a sleeping storm. The anti-null crystal glowed brighter in Daniel's hand as the chains around Soraka began to shudder violently. The humming grew louder, like a machine losing control. Sparks danced along the metal, and for the first time, the ancient bindings began to crack. Soraka watched in silence, her glowing eyes reflecting the lights from the breaking chains. She felt it, the power returning to her, like a flame reigniting in her chest after centuries of cold. But the guards were running toward them, shouting commands, their weapons raised. Daniel kept the crystal pressed tight, his teeth clenched, his body shaking from the strange energy flowing through the air. He didn't look back. He didn't care that death was charging at him. Suddenly, a sharp voice from the guards echoed, "Step away, human. Step away, or we'll shoot." Daniel didn't move. Then with a loud snap, one of the chains broke, completely shattered like glass. A deep sound like the rumble of an earthquake came from Soraka's chest. She stood taller, the first time in centuries, her form rising with strength and grace. Her hair whipped around as if moved by unseen winds, her violet eyes blazing like twin stars. The guards fired. Beams of light and energy shot toward Daniel, but before they could hit, a shimmering barrier appeared around him. The beams bounced off harmlessly. Daniel looked up in shock. Soraka had raised her hand, her power shielding him. "You are under my protection now," she said, her voice deep, powerful, but warm. The guards stopped, staring in terror. They had never seen her stand, never seen her awake. She was supposed to be powerless. But now she was alive with power. "You should have left me asleep," one guard muttered, trembling. Soraka looked at them with no anger, only pity. "You chained me for your fear, but I never wanted to harm you." Then she raised her hands, and the remaining chains crumbled into dust. The ground trembled as her energy surged, and the sky above them flashed with violet light. Daniel stood up, barely believing his eyes. "You're free. Not yet," Soraka said. "There is still one more chain, fear itself." Suddenly, the air changed. A loud sound filled the sky. From above, massive warships descended, their engines roaring, their lights sweeping across the city. The rulers of the planet had been watching, and they knew Soraka was free. "They're coming to destroy you," Daniel said, looking at the sky. "They will try." Soraka replied, "But I will not run." One of the ships broadcasted a message loud and cold: "Surrender, or the city will burn." Soraka looked down at Daniel. "You gave me hope, human. Now I must protect more than myself." She turned toward the sky, her body glowing brighter. She stepped off the platform, floating gently into the air, her power swirling around her like a storm of light. The warships opened fire. Beams of destruction shot down, but Soraka raised her hand, and a massive shield of violet energy formed above the city. The beams struck, but nothing broke through. The citizens watched in awe and fear. The monster they once cursed was now saving them. Daniel stood below, watching her rise like a goddess of light and power. She wasn't a monster. She was a protector, just as she had always been. With a wave of her hand, Soraka sent a pulse of energy into the sky. The warships trembled, their engines failing, their weapons shutting down. The ships didn't explode instead. They stopped, floating powerless, caught in her grip. She spoke loudly, her voice echoing across the city. I was made to protect, not destroy. I will not kill you but leave this place. Let fear die here today. The warships, powerless and defeated, began to retreat. The sky cleared slowly, the danger fading. The city stood in silence. People emerged from their homes, staring up at Soraka floating above them, her light still shining. Daniel walked to the center of the plaza, looking up at her with pride. She looked back down, her eyes soft. You kept your promise, Daniel called up. You protected them. I only kept my promise because you reminded me who I was, she replied. Slowly, Soraka descended, her feet touching the ground gently. She stood tall and free, no chains, no bindings. The citizens of the city watched, still afraid but confused. The monster hadn't destroyed them. She had saved them. Daniel stood beside her. What now? Soraka smiled faintly. Now I live, free, and I will watch over this world, not because they deserve it, but because life is worth protecting. For the first time in centuries, Soraka was free, not just from chains, but from the lies that held her heart captive. And it was all because one human refused to see her as a monster. Some stories spread not by the voice of kings, but by the whispers of those who saw the impossible with their own eyes. The city of Arkan was forever changed. Where once stood a chained monster, now stood Soraka tall, powerful, yet peaceful. The citizens who had once thrown stones, now stood at a distance, watching with wide, uncertain eyes. Fear still lingered in their hearts, but it was now mixed with awe. Daniel stood by her side, looking up at Soraka's face. She was silent, but her presence alone was enough to calm the air, as if the world itself was taking a deep breath after centuries of holding it in. Word spread fast. The nearby cities, the far colonies, even the space stations orbiting the planet all heard of what had happened. The stories twisted as they traveled, but one thing remained the same. The monster was awake, and she had spared them all. On the fourth day after her awakening, the city leaders came forward. They stood before Soraka, their heads bowed low. These were the same leaders who had ordered her imprisonment long ago. One of them, a tall figure with silver skin, stepped forward. His voice trembled. We feared you, Soraka. We believed the old stories. Soraka's glowing eyes stared at them, but she said nothing. Daniel stepped forward. You didn't just fear her, you punished her for something she never did. The leader nodded. Yes. And for that, we are ashamed. But what happens now? Will you destroy us? Soraka finally spoke, her voice deep and calm. If I wanted to destroy you, I would have long ago. I am not here to punish you. I only want one thing, my freedom. The leaders exchanged looks. Then the silver-skinned leader said, You are free. You have always been. But we were too blind to see. Soraka turned to Daniel. Is it truly freedom, Daniel, if the world still sees me as a monster? Daniel shook his head. Not yet. But we'll change that together. And so Soraka did not leave the city. She stayed. She walked the streets, slow and patient. The people watched her from windows, doorways, rooftops. She didn't speak much, but her presence alone started to break their fear. One day, a child approached her, small alien with bright green eyes. The child looked up at her towering form and asked softly, Are you going to eat us? Soraka knelt, her large frame moving gently. No, she said softly. I only wish to live. The child smiled and held out a small flower. Soraka took. it carefully between her fingers, her eyes softening. That was the first gift she had ever received, and with that small act, the world began to change. Stories spread far and wide, not of the monster who killed, but of the guardian who protected, who held flowers instead of weapons. Artists painted her portrait, not as a beast, but as a protector of the weak. Writers told tales of the human who saw the truth when no one else did. One day, Daniel stood with Soraka atop a hill overlooking the city. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" she replied. "Not breaking free sooner." Soraka smiled faintly. "No, if I had broken free in anger, I would have proved them right. But because of you, I remembered who I was meant to be." Daniel chuckled. "I'm just a stubborn human." "Stubbornness can change the stars," Soraka said. Daniel looked up at the sky, the stars bright and clear. "What will you do now?" "I will travel," Soraka said. "See the worlds beyond, protect the forgotten, the weak. But I will always remember this place, and I will always remember you." Daniel smiled. "I'm honored." They stood in silence, the wind brushing past them gently. Below, the city lights glowed warmly, not in fear but in peace. The world that once chained a guardian now stood watching her walk free, no longer a monster, but a legend reborn. And it all began because one human dared to see beyond the chains.